Coming up next on Landscapes Through Time, David Dunlop visits the stunning Hudson River Valley vista at Olana, home of artist Frederick Church.
Hi, I'm David Dunlop. I'm a landscape painter. And this is Olana. This is the home of Frederick Church. And this is where the most famous and popular of the Hudson River Painters would build his home. That's it, that Persian fantasy. He builds it in about 1867. It takes a few years. He's now a mature artist in his 30s. And he spends the rest of his life grooming and landscaping these grounds.
What happened to Church in the Hudson River School? What was their legacy?
Let's set the stage. Imagine it's 1825. Thomas Cole is attracting attention of some painters in New York City, and that begins the Hudson River Painters movement.
His paintings reflected an inspired personal experience before nature, unlike his peers.
And he has one principal student, Frederick Church.
From 1844 to 1846, Church studied with Cole for a 2-year span. This will be the only formal instruction that Church receives.
Thomas Cole's house is just over here. Behind these trees is the Hudson River, and this is all part of the Hudson River Valley. He gets some traditions from Thomas Cole, too. Some of those traditions include this dead old tree. Well, there's a romantic tradition from Salvator Rosa, from Claude and Poussin, to put in symbolic and romantic elements, like this, and a beautiful natural vista. It's an Arcadian vista. It's not wild. It's not wilderness, although he'll become an explorer and go to those places. They're scientists. And as scientist explorers, they want to know what the flora looks like, what the geology looks like. After they've really explored the Hudson River, they'll go all over. Church himself, he'll head out to collect iceberg pictures up in Newfoundland, volcanoes down in South America,
where he retraces the travels of his hero, the scientist explorer von Humboldt.
They'd had a mandate from John Ruskin in England. Artists should not try to improve on nature. Just paint it as they see it. Of course, as we see it, that's an ambiguous thing. We see in a scan it's out of focus. Only a small percentage of our vision is in focus. And they would pile up all of those little focus points into one extravagant painting. That's the finished painting, not the little sketches. They get augmented and synthesized into one of these big dramatic machines. And this is another feature of Frederick Church. He knows how to market a painting. Not only could he paint, he's sort of Hollywood, the selling of pictures. It was not done before. Imagine, there's a premiere in New York City. In the 1860s, that means Church is going to exhibit one of his big machine pictures, giant paintings with velvet curtains and palm trees and 12,000 people lining up on the streets of New York paying money to see his pictures. He does something else. He gives us a vision, an Arcadian vision, a wilderness vision, a spiritual vision of a great promised land, a sense of the divine and the sublime and the picturesque. It's borrowed from Europe and put onto the American landscape. And our idea of what is beautiful in nature, we can owe in part to him. See this beautiful park? It's an English gentleman's park. Looks like Capability Brown could have designed it. Calvert Vaux and Frederick Church designed it. Vaux and Olmstead, they designed Central Park. They get ideas from this sort of landscape painting. Your my ideas of parks and beauty and nature, they come from people like Frederick Church. We owe a lot to them, and their paintings are still beautiful to see, but I'm going to show you how to paint them, or at least how they start their paintings in terms of a sketch, because I'm going to set up my easel with my students here at Olana. We're going to be in different parts because he paints all over Olana. And we'll try out his ideas and we'll try out his techniques. When Frederick Church found Olana, it was an ideal, beautiful property for a landscape painter because of its perch above the Hudson. and off into the mountains. And he would spend as much time on this farm as he spent painting the pictures, especially in the last part of the 19th century, when he gets a little more crippled by arthritis in his hands and finds the painting so difficult to do. This sketch right here of Frederick Church's, it's just an oil sketch, and it wasn't any bigger than this, and he executed it really close to where I'm standing. He's out here looking for interesting views of the Hudson Valley, which is what I'm looking at right now, all the way down to New York City. And he didn't want anybody to see these sketches. These are personal. These are like a diary to an artist. It's not one of those big, finished, polished pictures that he liked to do, but this tells us how he made them. And all he's doing is a quick little zigzag. 1, 2, 3. And he's exaggerated the mountains. The big feature, of course, is this. There's the real mountain range, that giant cumulus. Takes up about 2/3. That's really classical. It's just intuitive to go to those thirds for him. The weather pattern inspired him. And look, it's these glowing pinks to violet to this green. Very casual, very quick. And this is the sort of thing we're going to do right now. I'm going to do my sketch, looking out on this broad plain. Starting at the horizon. And the diagonals to go downhill, we do that. That's aiming these diagonal recessionals to below, here's my sight line, to below the sight line. That pulls you down the hill. We've got the distance. There's the Hudson Valley. Now he would have pencil sketched this. Let's try it in paint. So let's put some paint out on the palette. Ultramarine blue was around. Alizarin crimson. Titanium white, lead white was his white. A gamboge yellow. And the copper-based blues, Scheveningen blue light. Vermilion, a red oxide. I'm going to get some paper towels and lay this in right now. I've got some medium over here, which is the oil. We have before us one of the favorite seasons of these Hudson River painters. Now I can make it browner by adding a blue. Just dull it down, see that? And we're getting closer to these tones. Pull in some of this. And remember those thirds that Church used? Let's try some of those same thirds. Here's one, here's one. If I do that, it kind of keeps me out of the middle too, and that puts a painting in immobility. And we want motion. A little deeper, richer. That is beautiful color. I love those colors. Run it all the way across. And a foreground, which is most of this. Lush green descent. In order to descend, I want my lines to appear to be aiming down, which means there's a vanishing point. Here's the sight line. And so any Hudson River painter, they were practiced at draftsmanship and linear perspective, not just atmospheric perspective or aerial perspective, but linear perspective as well. Scale matters to these. In a more finished painting, this color gets rubbed in across the whole surface. But in this sketch that we just saw, he didn't do that. He just went straight for some color, straight off this palette. Boom. It was no real preparation because he didn't anticipate that to be a more finished painting. Just a place to note some ideas. Now for that background violet. Again, take some of the alizarin. In 1867, this color was invented. run it across the horizon. The sky is a place for drama, as you saw in his sketch, and in fact, melodrama. It's Hogarth who in England starts to come up with this new aesthetic of exaggeration. And he notes that exaggeration in features or in people, in sky, that's how you get feeling, emotion into the painting. So I'll dive into this white in a rather careless and haphazard way, reckless abandon, and lighten up right along that horizon. And blend that horizon in with it. Let it fly up. Got a little yellow in there. Here's a chance to really play. And he liked taking risks. Well, I could have a diagonal of darks. Cole will do this with the oxbow. Innes will do this with many of his paintings. And being an oil sketch, I'm staying with big brushes. I haven't gone below a 1-inch brush. See this motion? Woo, woo, woo. Motion. That creates emotion. The measure of an artist was the extent of the trophies and the exotic places they could bring back at this time. Remember, we're around the Civil War and just a little past. And so those were the places that his patrons also liked to travel. And some of those patrons came here to Olana, where he would entertain them. Mark Twain was here and put on little musicales in the evening. It's in the dining room right behind me. So leading intellectual figures visited, and he had an intellectual appetite, as many of the Hudson River painters did. His library right here is just filled with science, especially geology. That was a new science. People like Agassiz, Silliman, von Humboldt. In fact, when they would go make speeches, they'd command huge crowds. Our entertainment appetites vary, as you can see. Now I'm going to find where is that Hudson River where it opens up wide right out here. Henry Hudson, great explorer, comes right up this river looking for another way to get to the Far East. And in Church's time, loaded with commercial traffic, just as it is today. There were more tourists then coming up by steamboat to the Catskills, to the Catskill Mountain House right over there. He makes the pond that I'm just now referencing right here. Hudson River School. You know, it wasn't a real school of painting. It was in fact a pejorative term. And it's an interesting thing that almost all of the major schools, the Barbizon School of Painting, that was a sort of pejorative term. Impressionist, absolutely pejorative term. It seems as though if you get a bad name in the press for a group of friends who are painting pictures, you'll end up being famous. Just warming this up a little with a little coral tone so that it offsets that ultramarine blue. Now, while he was a scrupulous observer of nature, that doesn't mean he was beyond caprice. In fact, capriccio, that's the Italian term for invented landscape. That's what all painters do. They always interpret to some degree because, look, this is 2 dimensions. 1, 2, just some pigment smeared on a flat surface. This is 3. And skies are so plastic. Because they're so ephemeral and keep changing, they offer opportunities for dramatic reinterpretation. This part of the sky is the closest part of the sky to me, just like this part of the ground is the closest part of the ground to me. That means the color difference and the ratio of values diminishes as we go back. That's part of the atmospheric or aerial perspective system that these artists understood so well, and they admired it. They admired it in the English landscape painters. They had seen them, they'd been to England. And those are paintings that are just of pure clouds. Long, smooth, gestured strokes. Sfumato edge, they learned that that dissolved, blended edge gives volume, suggests space, Da Vinci discovers this and appeals to that part of our brain, space, volume, and motion. And that's the part of the eye that's 90-something% of the eye. That's the outside of the eye. And they copied it from the tradition of these European painters. This one's for you, Fred. Of course, he would have said, well, don't show them your sketch, David. Little hints of the Hudson sneaking by over there with its distant mountains. So when he does, as we saw in his sketch, those little gestures of the trees, he's taking a round brush like I'm doing now, and softening those edges. Now this is a more finished technique, and I'm rolling the brush in a variety of directions. His vocabulary of strokes was enormous. There's a little reflective territory down here on this pond. I'll kick up a little light. Boom! These artists, Hudson River painters, they were of two minds. They wanted to get that scientific, empirical transcription down. These were landscapes of fact. And yet, as you saw in the sketch, it doesn't feel like a landscape of fact because appearance is important, but so is an ideal, subjective truth, a natural condition, a spiritual condition. They felt the divine presence in nature coupled with scientific observation. And it's in the big paintings where they would get actually more of the sense of scientific observation when they weren't in front of the scene. Here, they got the composition and the light. I could put a secondary S in here, just to show you a little road. A secondary serpent. That serpent, that's ubiquitous to art, whether it's Chinese or Asian, the dragon tree. So here we go. And now some little lighter spots in the trees again as I sculpt this volume like this, and then maybe some little more variety in the roughage right through here, rough it up a little bit so it doesn't look too groomed. They had a fascination with wilderness. Remember, they joined U.S. Geological Survey teams as long as they needed painters to do that work. Once the camera crews could do it, and that happens really after the Civil War, they no longer required the services of the artist, scientist, painter. See that added light right there between there and there? That's the effect of fluting in between ranges. You're getting a sense here of how the sketch works. It's just a preliminary oil device to give them ideas, something to refresh their memory when they go to make the large paintings back in the studio. And it's in that studio where he concocts the synthesis of these small ones into a great big theater piece. Let's take the tape off and see how we've done with our oil sketch. Take my gloves off, it'll make it a lot easier. I'm going to see how some other students are doing right now. So right up here, you can see them now, are some of the students. He paints here too. His wife, he paints in the orchard that's down below Cozy Cottage. There's a beautiful little sketch of her there. And when it was a beautiful relationship. And like all 19th century relationship, it had its hardships. You could count on losing some children in the mid-19th century. But at least this landscape kept him energized, engaged, and optimistic. Here's Lynn, Julie, and Lorraine. Hi, how are you doing?
Having fun, as always.
What a beautiful view you've got. And a beautiful painting. Lynn, just love your palette, so beautiful.
I started out wanting this to be more of an angle coming down.
Yeah, you should have pursued
and I
that.
sort of lost it.
Yeah,
Well,
and that's, you know what happens is the brain always wants to even things out. Your intentions are, you know what the design should be, and then the brain just pushes things to the middle. It pushes things to the static condition. And we want to keep them.
It happened with these too, because that was
Yes,
my
it just evens
diagram.
things out. I want things to go, the brain says, I want it to go to symmetry. But of course that's like saying, I want it to go to death. So we don't want it, so I'm going to bring back some of your original
So
intention.
you're going to start getting rid of the trees?
Yeah, the trees and the angle.
Okay.
So I'm starting where you started, and I'll bring this down so it's more, see that, much more of an angle, and so it's more dynamic. because to have that angle. And then we'll jiggle it a little bit. That also gives you a chance to put something distant here. There's a violet. You ever have the feeling that a palette is never big enough?
All the time.
But church used big palettes. George Innes, big palette. You could pick a whole tube of paint right on the palette. I'm just filling in this so we have a single dark shape over here. It's because I'm going to do a horizontal stroke here. I want it to run into an abutment. Whoosh, bang! All of them design, the Hudson River Painters design a picture so you can't escape, you stay in the picture. So I'm just borrowing some of their devices to keep you inside of the picture plane, as they say. And we'll get people to go down the hill. So first we'll just open it up and see what happens to the picture if we open up the meadow. We can take some of your greens and blend them into that hill right there. Certainly gives us a big expanse, doesn't it?
Feels huge now.
Feels, yeah, bigger sense of space. And then you can decide, because the scale, they were a little too large for the scale. And then 2 always divide. That's why classical tradition, as they knew, 3, 5, 7, they even divided the picture, like Claude, in 5ths, 3rds, 7ths, 9ths. So there would be a flawed symmetry to them.
So the scale of the tree, if I was to put one back in.
A little smaller and keep them together. I'm just giving us a little flatness to the field. Then I'm going to go into that sky, just to kind of give a little texture down in here. Your turp's back here, so I'm going to wash off this brush in the turp. Give it a little shower.
Bath.
Yeah. All right. And we need to jettison a few of these paper towels and pick up some more of these 19th century paper towels. The Frederick Church line of paper towels. Here we go with more ultramarine blue, some violet. That's going to be the thing that we can kick across the sky and do something melodramatic. And really it's the sense of the sublime. And the sublime is that there's something awesome in nature, something powerful. I'm darkening that gray even more with a little bit of that brown.
Which I never would have thought of. That brown just is like, but it's there. Definitely is making all the orange and yellow pop out.
Isn't it? Now we make it a little darker at the top. And it's going to mix with those other colors, a little darker up here at the top. See these darker clouds to the lighter clouds? Now I'll come down here with a wider brush and get some of this white. Maybe a little bit of that pink in it. And push the light this way.
But now I want to change the whole light in the rest of the painting. Because it's a different sky, and now it's different light.
You can still catch some sunlight here.
Yeah, but different.
Yeah, but different. Oops, can you hold on to that?
Got it.
We've got the wind. Feel like we're lashed to the mast.
And you want to keep pushing the white into the dark. You don't want to...
Yeah, right. You see how we feel the light coming from here? It's kind of fun to smear so much paint around. Then neutralize a little bit of this with some violet there, which I'm going to go back to here for. See that 19th century sense of drama?
Very.
Now this, of course, will neutralize some of this. See how they start to feel like they're integrated? You get to keep your vibrant oranges just because you've got a surrounded neutralizing violet. I'm going to put a little more, we'll put a little of this rose light up in here.
That is great.
Because we're tying this all up. And then we're going to make this part of this. But I wanted to show you what a big melodramatic sky would, and simplification. But you already had started simplifying. You took the shed out. So they would synthesize these paintings. And it's an old tradition. Canaletto does the same thing. He calls them capriccios. Take a temple from here, a little port from here, maybe a boat reflection from here, put them all into one painting. Claude does it, they all do it at the Tivoli Gorge outside of Rome. Our Hudson River painters do it on this landscape here, saying, I'm going to observe nature scrupulously, but the shed goes.
Or maybe they'd paint a shed and put in another painting.
Exactly right, exactly right. Well, I'm having fun working with you.
That was great fun.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Sure.
By 1880, the Hudson River Painters had had their day. They were eclipsed by the Impressionists. By 1902, most of them were gone.
They left us a legacy.
They built their pictures on a tradition that was an old one, a European one, and they brought it here to the American landscape, which they dressed up theatrically, gave it a visual national identity and mythic promise. The Hudson River Painters helped to develop the preservation and conservation movements, the national parks.
And I'm still left with a sense of awe over the sense of spiritual wilderness they passed on to me. I'm David Dunlop. I'm a landscape painter.